Welcome to Can't Stop the Pop, the podcast where we, that's me, Matty,
and me, Craig,
do a deep dive on a song from the 90s or noughties. And we have a very special guest joining us this week. We have James Rodriguez, otherwise online known as the Original Doll. You may know him from his very popular podcast series. So, hello, James. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what your musical relationship with Madonna is.
Hey, well, thank you too for having me. Clearly, you know I'm a fan. Thank you.
I never noticed.
The great thing is, it's with you all, and just like with me, it's just like honoring. There's so many great moments in music that people forget how big they were, and we also forget how music at so many different times connects us. So you can have a soundtrack from the high school years or secondary years that it's a very select group of people that felt the same way. They're like, oh my God, those were the songs we would go out when we were out later than we were supposed to before we got home to the parents. So my relationship and what I created was just a show and videos honoring all of these artists. And there's so many great creatives. What Madonna did, only Madonna was able to do. When you look at every single huge rock star, pop star, everything, they all know Madonna. That is the ability she had in making music that impacted each genre. That even if you couldn't name every single song from every single Madonna album, you knew the big Madonna moments. You knew who she was. And in a time where oftentimes we overlook all of those great artists, or specifically women in the arts or women in business, many times people forget about them, or they kind of push them away going, it's time for you to go away. So what I decided to do was start creating these, because these women have been supportive, specifically the Madonna, just talk about that way, with the LGBT community, that she was always somebody who was on the side of, the queer community. So we should be honoring what she has given us. And you all have been able to do that with all your chart facts and everything, and how so many of these artists, did make a huge impact. People are like, was that song big? Yes, this song was big. And here you are with the facts. You're like, it spent, 10 weeks on the charts at number 1, everyone. So yes, factually speaking, this is a hit.
Amazing.
Awesome. Right, so we clearly we know we're talking about Madonna this episode. But Matty, what song are we talking about?
We are doing Hung Up, the seminal classic. So we all know this song, but James, to cut back to you, tell us in the briefest way possible, which is difficult for all three of us on today's episode. Tell us who Madonna was and is musically, and where this song fitted in her career.
Well, I think where she was specifically, she was icon status at that point. She had already had decades of hits, but in addition, after her Ray of Light album, here in the States, and I'd say in most countries, she was finally getting the critical recognition, where people were finally taking her serious as a serious producer musician. So riding from that and Evita and everything, there was a lot of questions going, can a woman succeed decades into her career in the pop music realm, in the music realm? And she had, here in the United States, her American Life album, which I think is a gem of an album. It was not that well received by the public because she came forward very much anti-war in a time that we were dealing with war. So she was speaking up about, first of all, her freedom to say what she wants. So that's where she was at that point leading up to this, that she had already received the popularity, the critical acclaim. Then she released an album that many people were like, kind of the Dixie Chicks things, where it's like, shut up and sing kind of thing. And people are like, she went too far. And so that's where she was at, leading to what would be Confessions, where everyone is like, what is she going to do next? She's offended these people. They've politicized her. Where's she going to go? Does she have the ability to continue on?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I think you two have a lot longer history with Madonna. I'm just going to get shot down for this. I didn't
Cancelled.
really cancelled. I haven't even said anything yet. I didn't have much awareness of Madonna. I remember when Ray of Light came out. I think my mum had it, and I remember Frozen, and then I the first Madonna single I bought was Me Against the Music. I had really no context for Madonna, but I've always said I think that's one of the great things about these artists is that you can jump onto their careers at any point and still experience a part of what made them big. But I definitely remember in the UK after American Life, there was a bit of there was the VMAs, and there was the Gap adverts with Missy Elliott, and I think there was a bit of has she gone? Is she not cool anymore? Has she gone too far? And I remember, for me, Hung Up and Confessions was a reminder of everything she was, and it's the first time I remember being part of that excitement about a Madonna single and a Madonna album, and it was so exciting to be part of it. It was a phenomenon. I remember it as everyone was talking about it. People who had the Immaculate Collection were like, "Oh, this is Madonna. This is what she's about. You're going to experience something immense now." And I remember that feeling. So this was the second Madonna single I bought after Me Against the Music.
Good choices. Good choices.
I know. I think, as you said, I know. Obviously, Craig, I'm sat here in my Madonna t-shirt with all my records, and my housemate is also a massive Madonna fan, and so I'll try to keep this. I try to keep my initial thoughts brief, because I don't want to be on a soapbox. But before we get into the actual song, I think, James, you just hit the nail on the head. That for me, I was of an age. I was 9 going on 10 when Ray of Light came out, which is my favorite album ever. And you are at an age where you're aware enough of music. And as you said, Craig, I was first introduced to Madonna through my mom. And she had the Ray of Light album and then the music album. And it was the first real pieces of pop music that I thought, wow, this is what a record is. This is what a record, listening from start to finish, what a pop experience feels like. This is what it feels like to adore an artist, not just love a song on the radio. And then the first album CD of hers that I bought was American Life. And as you say, James, that was such an underrated gem of an album. And I'm so glad that people look back on it now with so much reverence. And it was just so good on the Celebration tour when she really let the album shine, the songs that she did for it. And for me, Confessions was that run between 98 to 2005/2006 of a period in my life of growing up and going from a child to a late teenager, and then going off to university. I was 16, 17. And then when I was 18 and like going out clubbing and stuff, and they were still playing songs from this album. And this song, we talk about on the podcast about songs taking you back to a specific period of time, but I'm not going to get emotional. But honestly, this whole album and this era, it starts, and every single thing about it like really gets me and just takes me back to that period of just that really just loving pop music and loving everything about it. Yeah. So there we go. End of the episode.
and I want to jump in there because with both Craig and Matty is we talk about those seminal albums that were the high school thing where you actually got to use your money to buy what you wanted. That is a big thing. When your parents were buying you stuff or you were getting gifts or CDs or whatever it is, that was one thing. But when you made the active effort to make your own purchase, that holds power in it. When you chose, when you're making whatever squid, whatever pounds, whatever that you're making, you're just like, oh, do I really want it? And it was expensive at the time to buy, you know what I mean, to buy CDs. That I think that's really when you start creating what you want to hear. You're not sitting next to a radio listening to whatever's on. You're buying an album and playing it from beginning to end. And that's what was happening with a lot of these these 80s artists, these 90s, these early noughts, like you had so many people creating actual albums full of songs. Madonna being an 80s artist, you know, the recording career side, she knew that she needed to make an album that was cohesive, that you weren't just like, wait, I have no idea why this is on there. Skip, let me go to the next one. And so with this, she was able to do a cohesive album, change her music taste at that time. And it was genuine because when you knew Madonna, you knew she loved disco. You knew she loved Giorgio Moroder. You knew she loved Donna Summer. She's always been somebody who's acknowledged those that came first. And that's why even Craig, there's so many people I talk to when I talk to the Britney Spears producers and songwriters are like, I didn't even, some people are like, Circus was the first song I ever heard of Britney Spears. I didn't know she had Toxic, or I didn't know she had Baby. It's when people come in, but it speaks highly of the artist when you can have fans of different demographics coming at different times. Now, with the digital side, we can all play these great songs all the time. But back in the 90s or the early 2000s, you didn't, you know, you couldn't really just take a CD to your friend's house and then have everyone listen to it at the same time. Now you have the accessibility to fall in love and be able to watch those live performances. We talk about Steps, Billy Piper, like Spice Girls, all these people. They had those iconic visual moments that made us fall in love with them. Madonna had that for people that nowadays, most of us didn't see those live performances at that moment, but now we have accessibility. So we can re-fall in love. And it's a testament of these artists' work that it still holds true today and still makes us want to listen to all this music. And that's what you guys are doing. Like, you can't stop the pop. Like, this is what you're honoring great music. And some people are like, I forgot about that. How many times have you seen or somebody go, I forgot about that song? And it brings back great memories. And that's what you're all doing.
Well, there was a bit of this song that I actually forgot about. And because I went back and looked at it and I remember thinking about how it was I think probably the first Madonna song of the digital era, because it was and I remember there was a lot of, do you remember that Motorola phone? The song premiered on the Moto Rocker advert, and she was crammed into this phone box and you could hear hung up in the background, but it didn't have the sample in it. And I watched that back and I was like, I forgot all about that. I forgot that was a thing. That I remember just I think there was a teaser on her website of just the ticking of the clock. And it was that time when you could go, have you heard this? Have you, this Madonna song is coming out, and have you, I remember my friend, I was at university at the time, my friend was obsessed with Madonna, and I played her that ticking, and she went, oh, this is going to be amazing. And I was like, okay, it's ticking. It was amazing, but so it's just ticking.
You're like, it's just ticking. She's like, this is going to be a global hit. Your friend was right. Always
she
listen to her.
She was right, yeah.
I remember that website link so clearly because it was the ticking, and then it became a ticking with the beginnings of the bass of the ABBA sample. And I remember going, what? She's sampling ABBA? Because as we all know, and if anyone doesn't know who's listening, it's extremely rare that they've ever given out their music as a sample in another song. Obviously, artists have covered their songs, and obviously they've given the catalog to things like Mamma Mia. But in terms of sampling it and creating a new song, it's a total different topic, and we'll get onto that, I'm sure. But before we get into the bones of the song, James, what you said is so true about you like buying the single and the album and you owning it. I remember so vividly. I was in sixth form, I believe, which is in the UK is what we call our college years, like from 16 to 18 before you go to university. And I think I went on a free period, and I walked all the way, like a half an hour walk, to go buy the CD at Woolworths, and then came back, listened to half of it on my little Walkman. So I only got through half the album. And I remember walking into my class as the album's halfway through, and everybody knew that I was just that stereotypical homo in my class that was like, the new Madonna record is out. And everyone was like, how is it? I'm like,
You were
it's
part of her
amazing.
street gang.
Okay, I was like, I was there. Yeah. Oh, right. So let's break down the song. So when it comes to this specific song, I like the history of it. It was obviously written by Madonna and Stuart Price, and it's got the ABBA sample. But James, give us a little brief talk and history of how this specific song like came to be.
So what was interesting is after American Life came out, Madonna was really at a crossroads with where do I go musically? Because at that point, she has tried so many different genres, tried so many different things, did Evita, did all these great things. And first and foremost, Madonna's a creative, so she always needs that outlet to go through. So she was working on different musical projects that didn't work out. She was trying to figure out what would work out. She thought she was going to work with one producer, didn't. And something that a lot of people don't realize is there are so many of these artists that begin working on a project with one producer and it just nothing comes from it. And they just kind of leave. And it has nothing to do with saying those were the worst songs. It's like, well, we're not getting what we think we could. So let's just go to this. So Madonna started, working on what would be Confessions on the Dance Floor. And the great thing is with Stuart Price, and I mean, he's somebody who the general public, I will say, doesn't realize how I'm trying to think of the word, important he is in music, in touring, in creating different remixes.
Yeah.
He's worked with so many huge icons and has been able to sit back and allow them to still shine, but he brings them to a different place that maybe they wouldn't. So when they began working on this, of course, this would be something that no one would think, let's have Madonna do a disco inspired, marauder kind of album, because you'd think, well, no, we have to think of something new, something crazy different. And it's like, but Madonna, there's always storytelling in these songs. People don't give disco songs enough credit of being these stories of heartache, stories of love. That's all they were. And they were even able to do it with limited lyrics. Like I Feel Love, Donna Summer, all of those where you feel what they're saying because these are storytellers. So they started creating what would become Hung Up. And what was smart is going, well, we would love to use this sample, but maybe we might not be able to use this sample. So let's create a version without it. Because if you throw all your eggs in one basket and go, it'll be fine, they're going to say yes. And then you get that notice saying, denied. You know what I mean? Then you're like, well, what do I do? So it was being created. And then from there, this fruitful relationship came with Stuart Price and Madonna creating something that was even elevating Madonna to a level that she had never been before. And it was just fantastic.
I think it's interesting as well. Obviously, we've talked about the ABBA sample, but she also samples herself in the lyrics of this song. She samples Love Song from the Like a Prayer album, which I will admit at the time, being a 15-year-old that was discovering Madonna's back catalogue kind of as I went, I didn't know that song. And then when I began listening to the Like a Prayer album, pretty soon after I listened to Confessions, I was like, hang on, time goes by so slowly. I was like, where are my disco shoes? Where is the disco ball? But I love that. I love that she managed to be like self-referential as well in it, because this song just was absolutely massive.
And everything tied in, the sonics, the lyrics, the storytelling. And when you heard it, you were drawn going, because there's so many people that say, are samples or interpolations, are they good? A lot of people say, it's a familiar thing. People will get used to it. But if the song was just absolute crap, it would not have gone over well. It had to be beyond amazing for all those critics to say, wait, these disco icons, these publishing titans are going to allow you to use this sample for a beloved hit. You must have something good cooking. And if not, I mean, it could have been terrible. And yet here it was, she was able to do something that was innovative. And at the time, there were a lot of the general public that had never heard Give Me a Man After Midnight. And that's
Yeah.
okay. That's the whole new thing. There are a lot of people that were like, wait, that's a sample? Who is ABBA? Like for me, I didn't know, and I grew up in a record store, but I grew up in a record store post disco. I knew maybe one song by ABBA at that point, because I was into Lauryn Hill. I was into, Mary J. Blige, more R&B, Janet Jackson. So then I go, wait. And what was great is that it made me go back and listen to who ABBA was, which is what that referential thing is. You go back and go, this is awesome. This album would have worked in the 70s, early 80s. And it was still Madonna, yet it was an advanced Madonna, decades into her career when all that well of creativity could have dried up. She gave us something that we were just kind of like, even if you don't like Madonna, you still have to go, that song is pretty badass. That song is really good. It's catchy. So, and people hate when the song is catchy. You know what I mean?
I remember
I mean,
playing it. Sorry, I remember playing this album and in our sixth form common room, and a load of, at the time you would have probably called them the chavvy lads, or the lads who are a bit rougher around the edges. They were like, "Oh my God, Atkins, what's that song you listen to? That's great. Is that the new Clubland album?" And I was like, "No, actually, it's the new Madonna record." Like suddenly felt
I can just picture
really,
you turning in slow motion with your hair blowing in the wind. It's the new Madonna.
I was like, it's actually Madonna. So yeah, people stood up and really listened to it and took. No, sorry, Craig, I interrupted.
No, I think the ABBA sample works really well. It's genius, obviously musically, but I think there was a degree to which her image. I don't know. I certainly know in the UK. I think some of the interviews around American life were quite. Madonna fans know what Madonna is like, and when she is going to give an interview, she was quite reserved, and I think she didn't always come across very well to the general public in some of those interviews. And I think putting an ABBA sample, obviously ABBA had a huge revival in the UK with Mamma Mia. I mean, their greatest hits have been number one for weeks and weeks in the early noughties. So for me, I think it was an easy and immediate way of saying, Madonna, ABBA, this is a different type of Madonna we're getting with this album. The song was amazing, but I think that sample to the general public particularly was a huge moment in just resetting her image a little bit. And I think she did go on the charm offensive with this album in terms of the interviews, in terms of just her whole demeanor. I say that as someone who's not I'm very aware of Madonna, and I'm very aware of the way she is, and sometimes it works, and sometimes I can completely get why people go, "Oh, why is she like that?" And I think she really turned it on with this album in every respect. She made herself incredibly commercial again.
Well, and I think what was smart about that, so I had lived a bit in the UK during the American Life album, and I'd actually seen her at HMV when, during the American, where she did like 3 of the songs. It was amazing. But the crazy thing, and this was the American Life thing, is how different when I was in the UK living there, how different the songs that the UK people liked of Madonna's over the US ones. Because like her biggest chart hit in the States is Take a Bow. It was number 1 for like 7+ weeks, huge. But then in the UK, it, I think, peaked at 16 or 7, something like that, where Madonna was trying an R&B look. And I think she is a creative. She's also a performance artist. She knows how to play with any crowd. The Tears of a Clown, all of these things, she's able to adapt that persona, because that is all what she grew up with. David Bowie, all of these people. And I think there was a point where the media just attacked all of these women. So then a lot of the women became, what do you want me to say? That I'm naked too much? There's always something, and they would say, Madonna, you have to apologize for being X, Y, and Z. So I think she was just like, I really don't care. Like me or hate me. She doesn't have to. The guys were not getting the same questions and the same media attention, and everything Madonna was doing right away, it's like, oh, she's gonna bomb. She's not gonna do well. But a male counterpart to her, not that there was, but a male artist can fumble through mediocrely, and they're like, oh, he's just being a funny guy. But Madonna saying the same joke, they're like, oh, how terrible of a person she is. But I think she's beyond brilliant to where she knows how to work the audience. And that is a skill set you are born with. No one can teach it in school. There are those artists that you see, they're great artists now that I'm like, great songs, zero personality. Madonna gave you everything that you see, and so much so that the generations after her are still nodding her. But I think she approached the release of it, and I feel like, in my opinion, there was a lot of anger, because American Life is in my top 2 favorite Madonna albums of all time. All time. I could go on a, tirade about it. But what she did smart with Confessions is she said, I can still talk about just coming together. I can talk about love, like being one with a community, and make it so that it's fun. You want music that still has meaning and is fun? Here's a disco album that I'm giving. And I use disco in the broadest sense because she kind of dug a little bit deeper. But I think the brilliance in what she's been able to do is adapt herself to always being Madonna in that moment. And of course, people are like, she doesn't, these interviews, and it's like, there are pop stars nowadays who don't give interviews because when you hear them speak, you know that they're not producing, they're not writing these songs, they're not, it's all a manufactured front side. Whereas Madonna's just a human being that's like, I'm Madonna. Like me or hate me. But guess what? Most people in the world can name one Madonna song. That's the other thing to keep in mind. And her having another hit just in the past year, I just think is amazing. But I do think her personality changes according to the projects, rightfully so, because she plays into that, the whole aesthetic, her whole look.
I loved with this, to talk about, you mentioned the broader campaign with the album. I remember the first time that I we were listening to it through, and I had a group of friends at school, and we were all sort of talking about the new record. And I remember everyone was really pleasantly surprised that the album had so much more depth than I think people were expecting. Confessions is such a great album because songs like Isaac and Like Me or Not, and even like Sorry, like the follow-up single to Hung Up, lyrically had so much more depth than people thought. Not that Hung Up doesn't have depth. It doesn't. It's got great lyrics and it's got that amazing sample. But there was definitely an element, I feel, that people were like, oh, great, well, she's got that. But, like, what else has she got? And then you listen to the album and, like, the proof is just absolutely in the pudding. Yeah, I loved this whole era. I thought it was brilliant. And the song just, like, takes you right back into that period.
And Craig, you hear about these artists nowadays that reference Confessions, that reference the fact that they were great lyrics, great production, and also was like nostalgic, where it was nostalgic, but it was also in a new way. And I think that's the brilliance in it. And I think there are lots of people that have tried that, you know what I mean? And then they gave their best effort. But it had to have been the formula of Madonna, Stuart Price at that moment. And she had nothing left to prove. She had nothing left to prove to anybody. She didn't have to do anything ever again. But she was like, wait, you're saying the press was, you're too old. You need to not, you need to cover up. You need to write, this kind of album or that. And then she comes out with an album that, like, across the demographic, it was, and Craig, when you were talking about the digital part of it, this was one of her actual songs that was released globally at around the same time. Because we all, throughout that time, we would get singles in the US, you would have them like 4 months later. We would get singles 6 months after you all had it. This was the time where all of us got a taste of that music. That's the brilliant part of the digital, where we could all enjoy it together in different countries.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a massive thing of this single particularly, is it did feel like it happened at the same time. It felt like it was everywhere. And I remember I was watching the Grammys performance with the Gorillaz. And that it was incredible. She was able to do that because all of these songs were known in America, in the UK. They were known everywhere. And I remember that. And I think in some respects, I think of it, I know we will talk about the chart stats, but I think of this song as coming just before, particularly in the UK, digital properly took off. We were still in an era where for a song to chart digitally, it had to have a physical counterpart. So I look at this song and I think, if this had happened a couple of years later and the market was in the way it was at the end of the noughties, this would easily be her biggest single by far. It would be a million seller. It'll get there eventually, but it would be huge. And in some respects, the sales, I don't think reflect just how big a moment this was, just because of the era we were in, where digital was happening. It was creating events, but that didn't create the sales.
It was harder to find the singles too.
Yeah. But not for you, clearly.
It was just a behemoth in terms of like the size of this song, and there's a reason that it's the first song that she put on the Celebration Greatest Hits. There's a reason why. Like, James, I'm sure you went to the Celebration tour recently, and all I will say is that, so the only other time that I had been to watch Madonna live had been the MDNA tour. And I loved that tour. I really loved how dark it was. I had tickets to the Rebel Heart tour, but as an actor, I got a job and I was away performing on a boat. And one of the first things my mum said to me was, "That's great, Matthew. Can I have your Madonna ticket?" So when I finally got to the Celebration tour, all I said to my brother who was with, and I talk about my brother on this podcast all the time, we'd seen her do loads of songs that I love on the MDNA tour. He'd saw the Rebel Heart tour. But all I said was, I wish one hung up in its like original form. Because on the MDNA tour, she did quite a stripped back, ABBA-less, dark version, which worked really well, but it wasn't the disco explosion that you wanted. I cannot describe to you the feral nature that took over me when I heard the ABBA bass take over. I think the woman next to me thought I was having some sort of attack. I just screamed, "Oh my God, it's happening! It's happening!" And then she's just like taking off the jacket, strutting down the catwalk, the ABBA sample starts, the disco ball appears. I think for honestly the 3 minutes that she did the song, I was like, it will live rent free. The song finished and I turned to my brother and I was like, well, I can die happy now. I was like, that's it. Like, life is never going to get better than these 3 minutes that we just had. But it was so good. It's such a great moment live. Oh, it's brilliant.
Well, and that's the other thing with both of you, where in general, when you've talked in other episodes about like, there's a part of you that can fall in love with what the studio gave you, but then there's also the part that can fall in love with that live performance, that you always are like, you're super excited. And sometimes theoretically you could be bummed out when somebody's like, yay, they're going to be performing this song for the first time, and it was this big EDM song, and then they do like a reggae acoustic something where you're just like, oh, that's a choice. Do you know what I mean? That
Wow.
The live performance can also take, not in her situation, but sometimes it could take away the connection, because what you connect with it is not at all what you see. So there's the good and the bad with that, but it's always about connecting.
Yeah. So, I mean, and a massive part of this single is the video. I think we need to talk about the video, because
yes, that was the segue.
I know, smooth. I don't think, I mean, obviously the song's incredible, but I hope this isn't too bold a statement. It probably is. I think the video is probably her last, or most recent, I won't say last, properly iconic, recognizable look that anyone would know where it came from. The pink leotard. To me, the pink leotard is up there with the comb bra. To me, that is it, and I don't think she's done something quite so recognizable since. It was just, I think that look, regardless of what else goes on in the video, that look completed the package and made this, that was like, right, this is the next big moment in her career, one of the landmarks.
I have a question for that though. See, this is the part that I
There
love.
we go. Let's bring it on. Let's go.
No. But for that, let me ask you this though: all of these icons in the past 15 years, have any of them given you that kind of produced standalone iconic video? Let me say, you're thinking too long because you're usually somebody that's like, oh, it's this one, it's that one, it's this one.
Isn't any of these sort of icons? I would have said Kylie's look recently in Padam Padam is up there in her career as a staple. We'll still be talking about that song in 10 years, but I get I get the point that you're making, because I feel like the iconography is not there in as much anymore.
Because I feel like that was also at the time where it was peak music videos were still a huge part of their promotion. And I feel like nowadays, in general, a lot of videos just feel like they're phoned in. You know, that we don't look and go, oh, this is really great, because we're consuming it too much sonically, that we're already over that song and watching the video 2 or 3 times. Not everyone, but the general public. Whereas back in the day, you would have to wait for, any of the video stations to play that video, so you were excited whenever you got to see it. Nowadays, we have access to all of it, so we burn out of these quickly. I can't think of many artists that have had iconic artists that have had videos that it goes back to think about the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Those were all, whether it's Britney Spears, Janet Jackson, Kylie with Can't Get You Out of My Head, those all happened then. But how many of them happened more recently? And I also feel like nowadays, most artists are not taking time to enjoy an album era. Before, you could have tour for 3 years. Now you have albums come out. Nope, we're done. Next video. You know what I mean? Like, it's usually the first 2 weeks. Put a new video out, done. Then we're going to send some remixes, call it a day. But that's why I was asked, because I think I noticed that too. I can't think of iconic moments from iconic artists that the general public could even identify. And that, do you know what I mean? To your point.
I mean, I was struggling to think of a song I know from the last 15 years, but I'm just going to hedge my bets and just say I'm gonna guess that Taylor Swift has probably done one video that her fans would say is iconic. I couldn't name it, but I'm gonna say she probably has got one.
To be fair, but that's not the general public. I was saying the general public can identify it. The Cone Bra, everyone knows Madonna. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just looks like I'm going like this with my fingers, like.
But I remember the Cone Bra from school, not in school, but
what school did you go to?
I know. No, in the encyclopedia back before the internet, when you had to look up things in an encyclopedia, that was the picture of Madonna in the encyclopedia. She was in the encyclopedia. That was the picture. So that's how I knew of Madonna as a kid, as a picture in an encyclopedia. I didn't know when that was. I just saw a picture in a book. And so there was, life has changed so much, but that's, I think that is part of that. It does make it really hard to make iconic now, because to make something iconic is so much harder now, to get everyone to be in the same place and to make it impactful, and things move so quickly. Like you say,
penetrate and resonate. That's the big part of it. To be able to hold the general public in a chokehold. Not that Taylor Swift I have a Taylor Swift wall over there, but as Taylor Swift, where she makes these great videos and everything, but also we're not sitting with those because she's releasing an album, every 3 months kind of thing. We're not able to really take it in. We're already on to the next one, because if Madonna was releasing a new album every year, we might not have the same sustaining love on these albums, because then it's like, oh, she moved on to the next one. So then you're taking all of that in. And I think that's a huge part of what it is, because I don't think we're making iconic music video artists anymore, because MTV is no longer the big way to break an artist and to get a hit.
I think the last truly iconic music video artist, and not to bring up the controversial person within the Madonna episode, but I probably would say is Lady Gaga. in terms of like having those iconic looks, and we're talking around the 2010 to 2015
Born This
sort
Way
of
era and everything after.
Yeah, exactly. But right, to reel it back, we're talking about the video because we knew we were going to go on many tangents up and down. But so the video is just right, James. We're going to let you tell as much as you want about this amazing, iconic video. But I will just start off by saying that two of the locations, as the resident like performer in the group, I want to say that in a loose term, and Londoner. Two of the locations were Pineapple Dance Studio and the old Trocadero Centre near Piccadilly Circus, in the arcade, which is now no longer there. It's now a load of annoying tap shops. If anyone comes to London, it's not there anymore. But Pineapple Dance Studios is in the video, and I've auditioned there many, many times. Unfortunately, it was never for a Madonna video, and it was never in a pink leotard. But yeah, James, tell us about. It's like maybe this picture's somewhere online. I don't know. Tell us about this iconic video.
Well, I think what was great is it starts off visually where you're getting Madonna. You're seeing Madonna in what would be this, and I'm using era as air quotes, this era look, where you realize it's filmed in such a way that is a throwback. And you're getting the image of Madonna stretching. You're getting an image of Madonna just getting ready to do something. And in general, you're like, what is to come of it? And when you see Madonna dance in any music video, if you're a fan of Madonna or just a fan of music videos, you're excited. So you're drawn in already going, what is she going to do? Also, you don't know, is this going to be a huge 100-person chorus? Huge. How many millions of people are going to join her in this? So when it starts off this intimate thing, you're just like, wait, what is happening? Focus is on her. And it's on a new looking Madonna that goes back to an era. It's truly the first time where that look went backwards. Because when you looked at anything from music and stuff like that, that was like of the time. This, she was taking us on a retro video, and that's what she did. And I think it's one that is worth watching a couple times to see Madonna, the performer, doing what she does best. And to Craig's point, this is iconic Madonna. Your eyes are on her. She doesn't need a ton of people around her. She doesn't need a huge production to cover up that she can't hold her own. She does.
And she had broken ribs as well at the time. She'd fallen off a horse about a week before. And I think she had broken her wrist. And I was watching the video back, and I was watching when she's on the dancing stage fusion, I think, which we obviously naughty staple of an arcade is a dancing machine. And
I am an expert on dancing.
I was thinking, I couldn't do that in my heyday. I couldn't do what she does on that machine. And she had broken ribs and a broken wrist. For shame for me.
What a trooper.
Well, and that's one of those things. It's like the show must go on with her, all of us. And she's not just doing simple, let me step forward, step back, pas bourrée kind of things. Her whole body is engaged. And let's not forget, people want to throw out the age to Madonna like it's bad. I'm saying, look at this woman. She was like, I'm trying to look. She was 46, 47 years old. And so she was showing skin and showing that you can still be athletic at any age. I bring up her age because people want to talk down about it. And I say, no, she is that age, but she's still able to move. She's still able to outmove most of the general public. You know what I mean? And that's the other thing. So when you're watching it, you're thinking, when you find out she was injured and you know that she's like, let me just get to making this music video. She wasn't like, let me take a year off. It's about broken anything. You're not taking, 2 days off and calling it, coming back in. She did it right away. And to be able to engage her whole body. And these were the other thing to remember is these were full body shots that you were seeing of Madonna. You saw everything. It wasn't just, here's the music video she's, as I'm voguing right now, but it wasn't like music where it's like, let me try to hide a baby belly or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, here I am just going to show you what I do. And that's, I think, the brilliance of it. But knowing that she had to have been in pain the whole time. Just like, she's a showgirl.
absolute trooper. I just love we talk about the iconic pink leotard and the beginning in Pineapple and all that stuff. I love that the video still goes on a journey. I love when she walks out onto the street and she's got the jacket. It gives the video so much momentum and it's directed in this brilliant way. And then my favorite part of the whole song is reflected in the video, because I also love that it's the full version. She didn't do what was essentially like a radio edit version. She did the full version of the video. And I just love when it slows down and it goes to that really low bass and it's really slow-mo and she's doing the choreo in the club, which was then recreated in the Confessions tour, which I watched on repeat because I was too young to be going and appreciating probably concerts at that level. It would also way beyond my price range when I was 15, 16. But it's my favorite part of the video. And I love that even though we think of it in that iconic pink leotard and, it's the kind of album cover sort of iconography, I love that the whole video goes on a real journey and then it becomes the dance battle at the end with that full-on choreography, which she then recreates when she does it live. And it's just brilliant. Just like lightning in a bottle moment. I love it.
But it's also got the really easy to follow bit as well, which is another thing about. But that's another thing about the whole sell it to the general public. Look, I think I've told you before, Matty. I entered a drag queen battle to this song, and I dressed.
We're going to this.
I'm going there. I'm just going there. So I dressed up in a pink leotard. I went out to Primark and I bought a pink swimsuit. I bought a wig and some pink high heels. And I got up on stage and for 5 minutes, I went backwards and forwards. I went like that. And that's what I did for 5 minutes. And I won that drag battle.
There we go.
Thank you, Madonna. I do have pictures and they will be on our socials because I recreated the album cover and I recreated some of the single covers as well.
It's so good.
I didn't wear makeup, so it does look that I didn't commit.
And I think went as far as like the outfit, but the makeup, no, that's where I draw.
No, I draw the line at the makeup.
We had a thin veil that this episode was about my choice of song and bringing you on, James. Actually, it was about Craig revealing his drag alter ego to the world.
I knew it. This is the unveiling of.
Not quite.
Right.
Not quite.
Let's move on to the last chapter about the song. Let's talk about the chart stats. So, James, you are the expert of Madonna. You bring us to the church of the Queen. So we obviously know it got to number one in a lot of countries, but tell us a little bit about the chart stats, specifically of Hung Up.
Well, the crazy thing is this song did far better than I think most people thought. Guinness Book of World Records was like, girl, you got this. She was able to release a single that globally was well received. It wasn't just specific to region, and we all know this, certain songs can do well in one region than the other. Madonna was able to release something that brought her back to the top of the charts in many countries. Here in the US, she had great success with lead singles, and then for like the music album, it was great. Before that, Ray of Light, great. But then American Life really stopped. I think it peaked at number 37 for American Life, the lead single, where it was like 37. So everyone's like, well, Madonna, and once again, they were like, she's aging out. We're not playing her. We're playing these other artists instead. We're going to play, let's say, Britney instead of Madonna. Because radio stations for the longest time in the United States, and I think in many countries, they wouldn't play female artists back to back. There was this thing in the US where it was called Salad Gate, where it said when you make a salad, you want more lettuce than tomato. Lettuce are male artists and tomatoes are female artists. So you wouldn't hear, even in the 90s, you wouldn't hear Sheryl Crow with Natalie Merchant and Alanis Morissette. You would hear Sheryl Crow Hootie and the Blowfish. Then you would have Smash Mouth. You would have these other people. You would hardly ever hear Britney Spears next to Christina and later, Rihanna and Lady Gaga. So Madonna was dealing with a lot of that. They were choosing to play, and a lot of these top 40 stations are like, we're playing for the kids in the car, not the people at work. So they were like, the demographic is changing. And so Madonna, everyone's like, well, what happened with radio? Radio picked it up. On Wikipedia, they said it was like released at the, 18th or something of October. But in the US, over 100 radio stations started playing it October 7th. With that right away, that's a huge market. These people are coming in. So right away, the demand for that song was high. So when they were like, oh crap, now we need to start pressing these singles. You had Madonna come back and have a huge hit for her decades into her career when people thought that she was done. So I think that no one knew how big it was going to be. They knew it was a special record, but when radio pulled it and said, oh, we want this, we want to keep playing it, then they're like, well, what do we do now? We have this digital option. We have these physical singles. What do we do? How are we going to release this? And so I think everyone was grabbing it and it did well. And I think in the US, I'm looking, because Me Against the Music was after American Life. That was her highest peaking song right before, and that was number 35. So then all of a sudden you had, or Die Another Day was 2002. You had this come in and be a certified hit here in the United States. It didn't go number one, but it was a hit. It brought people back to listening to Madonna. More importantly, buying her music and wanting it on radio, which is what American Life radio stations just stopped. A lot of times these artists, after the second single, they don't do it. You all in the UK usually get more singles on Madonna stuff than we do in the US, which is bizarre for an American artist, but it blew up in a way that they didn't expect.
It's
I
mad to me
remember
that
this. I remember this era being. I used to look at the US chart stats quite a lot, and I do remember. I felt this was the point in time. I don't think she was as bothered about not being played by radio, but I felt Warner Brothers at the time got increasingly fixated on trying to get US radio to take the songs. And I think Jump in particular tried to push to adult contemporary. I remember thinking at that point that they're at risk of going off track with this. They're pushing it really hard at radio. And I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that the songs didn't take to radio in the way that they did everywhere else. I mean, this was a huge airplay hit in the UK. I think all the first three singles were A-listed of Radio 1, which but I do remember that as sort of as sort of a downside of the campaign. I do remember that it did feel like radio, just becoming quite fixated with getting that radio play, which some might say was what led to Hard Candy potentially, or one of the contributing factors to it. But we won't get into that right now. But that's
you just love sprinkling that out there.
Oh, I know. Craig just would do a whole episode of just little sprinkles and things like that. For the record, I love Hard Candy. We have no Madonna dissing here. Like, Craig, get back in your box. It's you know what is wild to me? That it didn't go to number one in the States. That blows my little gay mind. Because it is just, to me, this is like the number one of number ones when it comes to Madonna, because it was inescapable in the UK. And there's something that you both mentioned much earlier on that I kind of just want to link back to, in that the sample, it was inescapable here that it was ABBA, because as Craig mentioned, ABBA are like, whether you worked in a record store, as you said, James, and you weren't as aware of old disco music, you are so aware of ABBA from like birth here. And especially because they're also been ridiculously popular and successful here, but also as someone that works in musical theatre, Mamma Mia is inescapable in the UK. And that sample is so quintessentially ABBA. But what I do love is that it's one of those rare things that it was so massively successful. It was number one for what seemed like an eternity, even if it wasn't. And
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Well, there you go. But this sample, I remember so many people who maybe were like, do I know that? That sounds familiar. What is that? And it very much crept up to the point when I think in the UK, this sample for many years was as thought of as much as a Madonna song as it was as an ABBA song. And I think that's a testament to how big and
Oh my
successful
God, I
it
can't
was.
hear that sample now without thinking about Hung Up. No way. I mean, it helps that ABBA have got a massive catalogue, but that sample for me is, I can't hear that sample and not think of Hung Up. It's
you hear
the
sample, and then your arm just goes to the wardrobe and you just grab that pink leotard and
that
you're
pink
just
leotard's
there.
coming out.
Then the alter ego is there. It's coming back. Right. James, before we wrap up this wonderful episode, first off, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us. We really appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
You are so welcome. But give us some final thoughts and words of wisdom if there's anything that you feel that we've left out about this, this classic Madonna track.
I think that the thing to remember is where Madonna was at the time, that there were a lot of people betting against her, that thinking that she wasn't going to be able to, quote unquote, reinvent herself in a way that critically she would have success and commercially. And lo and behold, she gives people something and also reminds people, it's a nod back to, you fell in love with me on the dance floors. I'm going to tell you this whole story on the dance floor and still give you lyrics that matter, music that is relevant, and music that is iconic to Madonna. Because nowadays, and this is part of when I mentioned earlier about the visual artist, how many times have you been at a bar if Hung Up comes on and people are just, doing the dance moves, things like that, where it's like, it's such a moment that you think about. And so she's been able to penetrate society over the years and make us re-fall in love with her music. And also anybody, any demographic, black, white, anything, being Mexican, Madonna was played on, on stations that I listened to with my grandparents more than some of these other artists that were Latino and things like that. And she was able to genuinely cross genres, but she was able to give us something that made us excited about music again. That's the thing that I don't want people to forget. She made us fall in love with music in such a way that each of us felt like one of those songs was for us, whether it was for a drag show, whether it was, being her PR on the streets in school, that we all have our own special moments. And if she did not have the ability to make music that connected and mattered, no one would be talking about her music decades after these songs. She created something that is timeless. Her legacy stands on its own. There's no one like her. And for us, you may not like every single Madonna song. That's okay. She probably doesn't like every single Madonna song. You know what I mean? That's about art. It's subjective. But when you appreciate what she's done as a female producer, songwriter, artist, you realize she was always working against so many things that most people were not, and was still able to be successful and give us music that made us fall in love with her all over again.
James Rodriguez, mic drop, original doll. There you go.
I was getting a bit emotional listening to that.
That was, you summed up everything that I love about her. And you know what? Like I said, there's been so many artists there's been quite a few artists that we've done episodes on. And when we talked about a second season, the first thing I said to Craig was, I said, you have to let me lead a Madonna episode, and it's going to be Hung Up. It was because I was like, we held off so that, and then when we realized that we could bring you on, it's just absolute chef's kiss. So thank you so much from this little Madonna fan to another. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Right. If you want to listen to Hung Up, and why would you not after listening to us talk about it for an hour, you can find it on all streaming platforms. And where can they find us, Craig?
Well, Can't Stop the Pop has a website where there are over 400 reviews, and you can find that at can'tstopthepop.com. We're also on social media. I am at Can't Stop Pop on X and Can't Stop _the Pop on Instagram.
And I am at Matkins Actor on X and Matt_Atkins9 on Instagram.
And James?
Oh, and me on
James.
Instagram.
Yeah.
On Instagram. The.original.doll on Instagram. On X, James Rodriguez. RODRIGUEZ.
Wow, that is great. We need to be better with our we did fantastic. Craig, you go.
Well, we're also on TikTok at Can't Stop the Pop Podcast. That is CANTSTOPPOPPODCAST. How's that?
I'm waiting for you to turn into a song.
I'm going to remix that. But we're going to add an ABBA sample to that.
On TikTok, we basically do this, but in 60-second clips. We just talk about random songs from the 90s and noughties. And we're also at Can't Stop the Pop on YouTube because we are doing video episodes this season. If you're watching this, you will know that this is a video episode. If you're listening to the audio, you can watch it on YouTube. So check us out.
Amazing. Do get in touch. Let us know what you think of the song. What do you think of Madonna? What do you think of Hung Up? What do you think of the show? What do you think of James's fantastic show? Please check out The Original Doll on all platforms that you can. He's on all social medias. He is one of the best that is out there, and we are very lucky to have him on the show. Please leave us a review. Please leave James a review, but only good ones, wherever you get your podcasts from.
Thank you so much for listening, and join us next time for more
Can't Stop the Pop.